Welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B growth guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne. Today, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Kim Folsom. Now, I'm going to read Kim's bio because she's done a lot. I want to make sure I get all this in. She's a trailblazing impact investor, serial entrepreneur, and champion for underserved small businesses. As founder and CEO of Founders First Capital Partners, she's built the nation's only women and minority-led growth capital firm of its kind, deploying over $15 million to help service-based companies scale without giving up equity. Over her 25-year career, Kim has launched and grown 6 tech startups, raised more than $30 million, and created 500 high-wage jobs. She's also the founder of a nonprofit accelerator, a columnist for Inc. magazine, and a sought-after keynote speaker on economic mobility and inclusive growth. Kim, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump in on some of these topics, why don't you give our audience a little bit of your story? Tell them the winding trail that brought you to where you are today.
Sure. So as you shared with my bio, I'm the founder, chair, and CEO of Founders First, and it's been a 20 plus year journey getting here. I was one of those people that was trained from undergrad as a software engineer and wanted to be the next Bill Gates.
Uh-huh.
And had learned a lot along the ways of trying to get there. First of all, it was just figuring out how I was going to start a business, because in the late 80s, early 90s, all the ecosystem that helps, founders, be it tech or not, was not available to help you, launch a business. But a lot of the guys that I went to undergrad with, we all started our companies working for somebody else. I started mine working for NCR and their ATM processors, and then eventually went to work for various financial institutions and then wireless companies, and then launched my own company, having observed other people doing that. My first company I started in the crazy.com era, around the same time as some other that you may have heard of, Amazon, Google, with the goal of, had a small cap level, taking, a company public, but we were a platform that was called like a Netflix for helping continuing ed for
Okay.
physicians and certified professionals. And instead of going public, we sold to a publicly traded NASDAQ company. And thought that at this point I was going to go to work for somebody else running their business, but
Uh-huh.
instead I started a few other companies. And through that, I would say that I learned a lot. Learned how the importance of, not just having a great idea, but the ecosystem, and as a venture back founder, that, you have a big, audacious vision of where you want to go, but you need to really have a great distribution system to be able to scale. The right relevant capital is also key as well. And then, going through that a number of times, several of my investors said that, you should consider going on the other side of the table. I don't know if you want to pause. Can you hear the air? There was an air. Okay.
No, sounds great over here.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, I went through, raised over 30 million in venture through these 6 companies, and had 3 successful exits where, beyond the first exit sold to other companies. And I say I have two learning experiences as well. And one of the six companies was a consulting firm that helped founders, get access to capital, even if they were not tech companies. And it's interesting, all of those things, combined together with what I'm doing today with founders, because the companies that we fund are largely service-based or tech-enabled service-based companies. Um, I call it a little bit of my own personal therapy, having,
Mhm.
learned that how to start a business and grow it, do the milestones you need to go to, attract capital and get to the next phase. And I'm really enjoying being able to help other founders, go through those journeys.
That's great. So you hit on a couple things in there that I want to come back and visit. And the first of them, sort of towards the end, you referenced that, companies go through sort of these different stages and sort
Mhm.
of different phase shifts. And we've seen, from a marketing and sales perspective that, you know, there are kind of things that happen around 1 million that if they don't get them right, they just sort of will pop around 1 million for a while until they actually get those things in place. And then same around kind of 5 million and the same around kind of 10 million. And I'm sure that elsewhere within organizations there are similar types of things. You've had such great perspective on not only growing businesses through those milestones yourself, but also advising businesses through those milestones. Share with us some of your insights on the things that are sort of most important as companies go through different phases and how they can be sure that they accomplish them.
Sure. So, I would go through, when I started my companies, I had always thought of doing it with somebody else's capital.
Sure.
So that means that you have a higher level of responsibility and accountability. Now, you would think that you would have that with your capital, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But starting with a not just writing a comprehensive plan, but there's tools like Lean Model Startup that you can start with that really
Yeah.
basically has you have some discipline about who's your customer, what's your distribution channel, what's your model, and going through and setting up, sprints, if you will, of saying, I'm going to this is what my business is, and trying it out and not being afraid to adjust along the way.
Yeah.
There's so many people that say, I started my business because I wanted to work for myself, and they launch it. And as opposed to go through and saying, I'm gonna identify, pick a number, 10, 20 companies that would need this, run it by them with the goal of some small goal. I'm gonna try to get a pilot with them. And out of
Right.
the pilot, they're gonna be, satisfied with something such that they would either pay me more for it or start paying for it if it's a free pilot. Um,
Right.
but but that's the initial, piece of it. So many people start their business, especially, the assumption is most people start their business in college, which is not true. For every college, startup, there's probably five of them that start, because of an adjustment in the lifestyle. Either they realize that who they work for is ignoring an opportunity, or they, like my issue, I wanted to start one, but I wanted to, have it be, high eight, nine figures. So I'm going to learn from somebody else before I'm going to start on my own. But, once you get that going, but setting those goals, I mean, the other discipline, you're raising money from somewhere, you need to have a 3-year plan, 3-year, in the lean model startup. And another tool is EOS that
Yeah.
you probably have heard, people utilize, where it's a, you know, 10, 7, 5, 3, 1, and then quarterly, and
Yeah.
setting up your revenue goals such as that, and then being able to have the discipline of looking at where you are weekly, monthly, quarterly, and making adjustments along the way. So that's from just a foundational level. And then the other from a business model is to have recurring revenue. That's the other one. I find people that aren't necessarily into the tech startup ecosystem, they may, hey, I got this contract with some company, but, they go through and do all this work to get the contract, deliver on the contract, and then they're having to go through and find another contract as opposed to having more sustainability built into the model such that, beyond me doing this project, what type of recurring maintenance type of things to need. And that requires getting the discipline of talking to your customers about, you know, what do you like about what I do? What am I doing well? What do I do well compared to others? What are things that are important to you? Because the other thing with you change in the economic standpoint is you want to have a business is not a nice to have, but a critical, you're providing a critical solution for your customers such that you're not going to be, a discretionary item that they eliminate when times get tough.
Right.
Yeah.
You hit on some really great points there that I want to double click on. The first, I love the sort of process and system oriented approach. For our audience that wasn't familiar, EOS that Kim references, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a great format for it's got a prescribed approach to lots of things that are very important for how to run your business and can save entrepreneurs a lot of time in figuring out some of those things. But you also talked about, and I really loved this, the idea that instead of starting with, well, I'm an accountant, so I'm going to start offering accounting services. Instead, start with what's a need that the marketplace has that you can solve.
Mhm.
And if you're an accountant, chances are a need you can solve is going to be related to accounting, but it might not be the same thing that everyone else that hangs out a shingle does if you start with the marketing. And we have a phrase, all marketing starts with the market. And so by really understanding those customer needs, you sort of build the foundation for a much more successful business.
Right.
And then rather than sort of starting with, well, what I want to push out there, instead, start with, well, what are they asking for? What can they pull from me? And then you also hit on something that we hadn't necessarily planned to talk about, but I think it's interesting, and I wanted to get your perspective. We're seeing more and more service businesses that used to have these sort of tentpole engagements, and we'll stick with the accounting example. Used to be like they'd prepare your taxes for you, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, and then they'd go away. And then they'd come back either the next quarter or the next year and say, hey, can I do your taxes again? But with the proliferation of software and the ease of using technology, those companies are now identifying ways to add ongoing value to their clients through software as a service, maybe, or software with a service. That not only does it, sort of give them recurring revenue, but it also gives their clients better outcomes. Like in the accounting example, here's a good tool that helps you keep your receipts in order and identify opportunities to, sort of better manage your cash flow and other things like that that are quite simple sort of software implementations, but that make both the provider a better provider and the client a better client and deepen that relationship. Are
Mhm.
you seeing that spread throughout other, sort of professional services firms that you work with?
So sometimes it's having them go through, I guess, a mind shift of the fact that, yes, you do provide these tentpole project related services that can be annual, but it takes a mindset different of you need to talk to 10 of your customers and ask them, what are some of the things that they're going through? Because just as you mentioned in that accounting example, is the top thing that you're wanting to, generate, save some money? And what are some of the things that you do to do that evaluation and assessment? And what tools do you use to keep track of this particular things? And, if you could save, pick a number, 5%, 10% by having this monitoring, it's worth it to do those types of things, such as evaluate your expenses and see, it could be that you don't have um, a expense plan in place that your employees follow. It may be the expense, tool that you use, just as you mentioned, but those types can be a recurring, element that they can, be able to utilize. And so, where, X percentage of their revenue could be the tent pole projects, Y% of their revenue can be these other monthly evaluation assessment related things that can, add up, and it makes you much more sticky with that client than, oh my gosh, I'm just going to decide to switch.
That's right.
Because also in the accounting piece, that is one of those hindrances is as you grow your business, you go from quarter million, half million, a million. And then once you get past a million and 3 million, very likely the accountant that you had that took you to there is not the accountant you need to go to the next level. And
That's right.
that's the other thing that a lot of these businesses struggle with is that they may not have service providers that are up with where they need to be, and it's more of, well, if I tell the service provider that I do need to do these things, they'll do it, as opposed to, the service provider looking at the fact that I serve, pick a number, 10,
Right.
20, 50 clients, and what I'm seeing, these are the top 3 things they're doing that's saving money or that's helping them generate revenue. That can be a big differentiator for the company. And so, being able to go through and say, hey, when you get to these particular levels, it may be that you need to go from a cash based accounting to accrual based accounting, or you may need to put in some project based accounting, or, these various, elements, and then those particular elements to make your revenue scalable and sticky. And so one of them is changing the accounting support as you go from 1, 3, 5, 7, 10. Or at least recognizing that you have to go through and do that. So that's one. The other is it may be how you address payroll. The other thing that we do is fund companies. And too often we find people, oh yeah, we do our own payroll, internally. And it's like generally they are not in compliance, which,
Right.
depending on the states you live in, can be quite, taxing, and you may get fines for not complying. And so being able to go through and see that, what, it's time for us to use either an outsourced payroll solution, be it a TriNet or, JustWorks or one of those types of solutions, because they're going to, like, we're based in California, January and July compliance changes for payroll tax related things go into play, and making certain that you have those accurately in place.
That's right. Well, so you hit on two really important points that I want to highlight for our audience. And the first is, if you are a provider, choose niching down to, well, we service people around a certain size gives you the opportunity to really deepen that expertise. Although you could do the things that the $1 million companies care about, and you could do the things that the $10 million companies care about, by trying to do both, you're going to be distracted at either.
Hmm.
Versus if you're very specific on what you do, then you really become much more valuable to the marketplace. And
Hmm.
then that other, really sort of interesting takeaway is that as companies grow, it's very important that they evolve and
Hmm.
evolve the advisors that they use because I guess the old phrase, what got you here won't get you there, definitely pays or, bears out. But I think so few companies really acknowledge that and sort of make those sort of purposeful changes of we're now in a new phase of, growth or performance or operations or whatever it is, and we want to have the advisors that are experts in the phase that we're at.
Right. And don't do it alone.
Yeah,
There's, as a founder or CEO, there's things that you're, highest and best use of your time and expertise. But there's other people that are subject matter experts, and learning to leverage those, and joining groups, be it um, EO, like EO, Vistage, like women presidents organizations, supplier councils, where you're going to get a chance to interact with CEOs at the same level as you, or higher. Like the supplier councils, they have like 4 or 5 different classes. So they may have a class for companies that are 1 million, another one 10, number 25 or 50. And by being able to have those interactions with those companies that are where you want to go, they can give you a chance to kind of peer around the corner as to what's working and what's not and how they got there. And so, I think some of what I do is a little bit like therapy, because
Uh-huh.
when I did my very first company, one of my investors said to me, "Hey, Kim, you should consider, I'm a member of YPO. You should consider joining." And I was
Yeah.
just like, I don't have time for that. I'm so busy, working on my business, but you have to take a step back and work on your business and not just in your business. And, had I known what I know now, I should have jumped at the chance. I eventually like joined Vistage and those types of things. But, um, joining those organizations can be so helpful. Still, even in my seventh company, I'm a member of like probably a half dozen CEO groups that I contribute to and I learn from.
So you raise a great point, and I love that you're highlighting that even now, after you've had success that many people, aspire to and may never achieve, you still bring, make the time to get that expert coaching. And I think of this, all the time from, the best athletes in the world not only have a coach, they have a coach for, each body part almost. They have a coach for their eating. They have a coach for their mindset. They have a coach for, their speed and endurance and strength and all of these different things. And to think that, as entrepreneurs, we should not take advantage of that because there's this sort of myth that entrepreneurs can do it all or should do it all it's really sort of limiting in the
Right.
mindset that it brings people to. So
And
you touched on something earlier that I do want to sort of take a little bit of a left turn towards, which is, sort of funding. So, a lot of our listeners that are operators, they have sort of one mindset of, well, we're bootstrapping because that's what we know how to do and that's the capital that we have access to. Or we're venture backed because that's what, our plan was from the start and that's what, we've, sort of built our business around. But you have a unique perspective in that you've seen lots of different approaches to that, and can sort of recommend different approaches for different companies. Talk to us a little bit about the differences in sort of funding and how they work differently for different companies.
certainly, relevant capital is so important, and trying to force companies that are not venture-backed companies to pursue venture, which happens a lot because that's
Sure.
what's been so promoted, is such a exercise in futility that's just crazy. But there are alternative capital solutions. We're one of them at Founders First. You can use like revenue-based financing, various types of working capital financing. I mean, believe it or not, there's some companies that have built billion-dollar businesses from various having working capital lines as well as you know uh, uh, even various types of invoice factoring that it's worked for them. Now the thing that's key, it kind of marries along with um, having a solid finance and accounting support, somebody really helping you manage your cash flow of saying, hey, I got this new contract, I'm going to get paid in an X amount of time, but I need cash flow to cover my expenses, because generally those things don't line up. You
Sure.
have you know, you're paying people or expenses that may be weekly, biweekly, and you get paid from your clients monthly, quarterly. And so being able to have that alignment is critical. But especially service and non like high growth companies, having alternative capital, especially using models like revenue based financing, can help you work with those fluctuations in capital. The pure revenue based financing is more of like a royalty based model, which basically takes a portion of your capital, a portion of you pay back to a portion of with your portion of your revenues, anywhere from like 2 to 8% depending. And that could be a way of getting access to more flexible patient capital. But the other side of it is you've got to look at what your cash flows look like, you know. Um, and the other side of it is, you know, thinking about types of businesses. There are some businesses that raise equity capital thinking, oh, I'm going to be a unicorn, and they find out they're not. And but
Sure.
you know, just because you're not going to be the next, you know, Facebook or Google, and you're not growing, you know, 50 to 100% period over period, all's not lost. You know, the average business may grow anywhere from, you know, 5 to 20%, you know, period over period. So that's a great, you know, source of raising various types of debt capital, be it, you know, revenue-based financing, working capital, and those types of things. And it's, again, it goes back to having that accountant. But one of the other critical areas in order to get access to capital is your cash flows, really understanding your numbers and all those other things. But, you know, in the area of expertise that your organization have is your revenue, you know, revenue, the strength of your revenue, because that's going to also provide you with more options. And the thing that I see with some founders making the journey from 2 to 3, 2 to 5 million is to have somebody other than them helping them with generating revenues on a consistent basis. You know, having those two components, one, net new organic clients, and being able to see and understand kind of the cycle that you're going to get those new clients, and then the other, having an ongoing, you know, batch of existing customers that you have those recurring or renewal types of things, because that's going to help you attract much more reliable capital that can help you with growth. But there is a, you know, what we call the capital continuum, you know, from traditional bank, you know, debt financing, which, you know, they want you to be over, you know, 10 to 20 million, you know, to get access to, you know, more than like 50K of capital. And then there's, you know, some mission driven, you know, types of funders that can provide, you know, capital that's a bit more lenient than traditional bank. And you know, mission driven, that's you know, the bucket that we fall into. Because, you know, unless, again, unless you're going to be the next Facebook, you know, there's limited amount of venture or equity. I mean, as people talk about, less than 2% of equity capital is raised by companies. And, you know, they're not raised by non-tech and service-based businesses.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's so interesting just to think about it as a continuum rather
Mhm,
than sort of binary choices. And instead, you know, I have seen lots of companies have success with blending some of those things. But as you say, ensuring that it aligns with your business model
mhm,
and with the sort of structure of your cash flows. Because,
mhm.
you know, if you're not going to achieve sort of certain stepwise changes, then taking outside capital sometimes isn't the best idea even though it might sound sexy on paper,
Mhm.
it's not always the right thing based on your business model and what that trajectory looks like.
Yes, and, you know, just recognizing that it's a partnership, you know,
Yeah.
or even depending on the amount and type of capital, it can be like a marriage, you know, and
Yeah.
so there's a level of accountability that goes along with that.
So Kim, you're obviously an expert in a lot of really great things, and I'd love to, you know, sort of pick your brain all day, but I got to be mindful of your time. But before we go, like, what's something that's on the horizon that you're really excited about?
Certainly. At Founders First, we just launched a series of capital activation events
Uh-huh.
regionally. We're this year we're doing them in 4 regions. We just did one 2 weeks ago in Chicago, and then we have 3 more planned this year. One in New York City, another one in Pittsburgh, and then the third will be in San Diego.
Wow.
And, you know, as a tech founder, you know, there are, you know, events that you can go to not just go through and do these, you know, lightweight networking, but really having a deeper level of conversation to build relationships with funders about your current needs and future needs over the next few years. And, in the tech environment, there's lots of those, ways to connect where, you share some background information, financial information. And, if you're of a specific category, you're going to be able to get connected and having a much more meaningful conversation with prospective funders, as opposed to the, lightweight, hey, there's like 500 people and we're just exchanging cards. And so that's what we're doing with these capital activation events. They're 2-day events where you really get a chance to get to know the funders, a small group of funders in the region. And, our goal from these is to create a pipeline for these non-tech, service-based businesses to, get on the path of getting connected to capital and being able to get funded and being able to be, inspirations to other, asset light service based businesses is that you can intentionally get funded and grow.
That's fantastic. So, for our audience that's listening and sort of loving what they're hearing and would like to get in touch with you, what are the type of businesses that you work with at Founders First? Who should reach out, and what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Certainly. So we are focused on service-based businesses that are between 1 to 10 million in annual revenues. And they use a B2B, it's like they sell to either corporations or regional governments. Those are the ideal profiles. They're people-powered businesses largely, so service-based businesses, and they want to grow. They want to grow, anywhere from 20 to 30% period over period, and they want to do this with a partner. It's and so that partner is going to be such that they're going to share feedback about how they're doing, want input about how can they, grow and make improvements, make introductions, and provide that wraparound support. And as far as being able to find out where to find us, if you look, Kim Folsom or Founders First up on LinkedIn, you'll see some of our posts about our upcoming capital activation events planned for 2025. And, we've got a 3-year commitment, so we're looking to do this for the next few years.
Fantastic. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining today and sharing some of your insights with our audience.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
All right, talk to you soon. Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.